The Centurion Project. Written by the 8th Day of Night. Chapter 49. A Canterlot Wedding. Section 2, Part 2. The human cast an eye back, a small frown on his face as he watched the guards strap themselves back in to drag the carriage away. "What was that about?" he asked. Nice guy smiled up at him.
Black skies and Shadowmark are just a bit protective, and more ponies are seeing our friendship as something more. With our date tonight, they have become a bit fatherly.
She giggled and looked towards the parlor entrance, where Bookbinder's parents were greeting ponies. Both spotted him and gave small waves, then went immediately back to their greeting duties. No doubt they would have something more in depth when it was his turn to be greeted. "Why would they be fatherly, as you said it?" Elias asked as they got in line.
When I got back, I was much smaller.
Nice guy said.
You'll see in the coming months, but I truly put the word little in little sister. I was cuter than any pony in Equestria before the keepers restored my full alicorn magic, and those two were my first pair of recruited guards. Though I am hundreds of years their elder, they appeared much older than I was, so they became almost like uncles.
Her eye drifted towards the dark sky as she smiled in memory.
And, in truth, I quite appreciated it, and even encouraged the behavior. I have been without parental figures for well over 2 millennia, and after a tour of loneliness on the moon, I welcomed the affection. It certainly did not help that neither wished to marry, and so all of their love and affection was given to me.
Nice guy smiled diminished slightly, and she looked down.
That relationship has largely ended, though. When I returned with Tia from the Keepers, I was how you know me. Taller, more visibly powerful. I attempted to keep them close, but our time together as a pseudo-family was done. We became more friends than a niece and her uncles. And while I am glad for the continued friendship, I feel like something special was lost.
With a deep breath, she straightened and smiled again at Elias.
But it would seem that old habits die hard, and now their precious niece is going on a date with a notorious bad boy. I'm surprised they were as mild as they were.
Elias snorted. And should I expect further issues from your uncles? This guy shook her head.
No, I shall make sure they know their limits. While I appreciate the rekindling of that kind of relationship, I shall not have it at the cost of our friendship. You are far too special to me for that kind of sacrifice, and I will not have you driven away because of overprotective ponies.
Elias frowned. "Don't drive them away on my account," he said quietly. "I'm definitely not worth sacrificing longtime friends over." He waited in silence for a moment, and they moved up the line. It was only after he felt something burning into the side of his head that he looked down to find Night Sky's glaring eyes attempting to melt his skull. "What?"
What?
she hissed.
Elias Bright, I swear you act intentionally dense sometimes. I just told you that I consider our relationship special, and you immediately turned and said that I shouldn't sacrifice other relationships for it? I care about you, Elias, a great deal. I'd rather you didn't belittle us.
Elias blinked at her in mild surprise and raised his hands in defense. "Luna,
It is night sky,"
she growled. Elias nodded in agreement. "Fine, night sky. Just relax. I'm not belittling our relationship. I'm just suggesting you don't ruin your other ones for my sake. I think you can forget that I can take care of myself, and a bit of bullying won't shake me from doing what I want, which is currently to have a nice night with you." Night Sky blushed and looked away, her anger disappearing. She shoveled the ground with her hoof and she smiled faintly, hiding behind her mane.
Well,
He said slowly.
if you don't believe I should worry, then I suppose I won't.
Her green eyes poked out of her mane, still holding a hint of anger.
But please do not belittle yourself. I value you, not just because you are being a general for me, but because you are you. I care about you, Elias. I hope you can see that.
How much do you care, I wonder? Elias thought. He let them fall into silence, however, and they remained in line, waiting patiently as they inched forward. It took a few minutes for the pair to reach the front, and when they did, Velvet Breeze smiled widely and wiggled her hips. Elias quickly found himself in his arms outstretched and his feet planted as the unicorn leapt at him, wrapping his chest in a firm hug. Though it was forceful, the mare didn't weigh enough to bowl him over, and Elias managed to stay on his feet as she wriggled and nuzzled. Ishard snorted, smiling as Breeze pulled back in disappointment.
Phew,
She said, looking up and down Elias.
I was hoping to tackle you again. That's traditional greeting for the family.
For family, Elias echoed. Breeze's smile widened and she winked.
I won't say anything, but Bookbinder has been very happy about the end of this year. I hope you like snuggling, mister. I will have you know that Elias is quite the snuggler.
Night Sky said, moving forward to shake Ishard's hoof.
Night Sky, I am Elias's date.
The stallion met her hoof and gave her a hearty shake as she introduced herself. Pleased to meet you, Miss Sky, Ishard said with a smile. Have you two known each other for long? Night Sky smiled back at Elias, who was still holding up Velvet Breeze.
A few months.
She lied smoothly.
We actually met a little after he became a general. He was relaxing in the castle gardens while I was setting up my telescopes for a star pattern observation study I am working on with Princess Luna.
Velvet uttered a small gasp and looked back up to Elias.
She works with the princess too? You have quite a talent for catching special mares, Mr. Bright.
She wiggled in his arms.
Speaking of, could you let me down, please? I'm going to fall asleep if I snuggle with you any longer.
Elias crouched and set Velvet down on all fours. The unicorn gave him a peck on the cheek, then a wink as he stood tall again.
We'll make sure to meet your lovely date more at the reception, Elias. But why don't you two go get seated? We should be starting in a few minutes.
Night Sky settled up to Elias' side, and using one of her wings, she guided him to the wedding hall. Elias gave one last wave to Velvet and Ishard, and both returned his wave with broad smiles, before turning around to continue greeting guests. Elias quickly began a mental run through the entire encounter, looking for any place he might have slipped up and alienated anyone. But in truth, Elias could only feel two things: warmth of familiar love, and absolute dread of the same. The warmth helped him largely suppress any dark thoughts, however, and Elias went a step further to bury his emotions by studying the architecture of the wedding hall. With Night Sky leading him along, Elias used the opportunity to focus his mental energy on looking around rather than walking. He had been outside of many religious structures before, mosques, hundreds of churches, big and small, but his personal favorite had been the rare but stalwart cathedrals. Their polished stone had been battered by nuclear war, but those that hadn't collapsed completely were still a sight to behold, and a few had even intact stained glass. Elias loved the ornate nature of each room, and the main cathedral was always beautiful and complex. By comparison, the equestrian wedding hall seemed almost simple. It had many similarities to a church. Its ceiling was tall, and the hall was split into two sections of crimson cushioned pews, divided by a single aisle down the center. The red carpeted walkway led to a small stage, decorated with candles and a piano sitting to one side. The altar had an arbor over it, decorating it in a simple white. What drew Elias' attention, however, was the massive stained glass window above the stage. It was easily as tall as he was, if not taller, and it depicted an image of Celestia elegantly raising the sun, her eyes closed. It was a sight to behold, yet Elias couldn't help but frown as a question popped into his mind. He waited silently while Night Sky shuffled them into a pair of seats in the rearmost pew. They sat on the end of the center aisle, and Elias watched as Night Sky shuffled in her seat, making sure that her saddlebags were situated properly out of sight. When she finished, Elias leaned over, speaking quietly in her ear as he motioned towards the glowing window. "Is there a religion surrounding you and your sister?" he asked. "I was under the impression that the Keepers of Harmony were the only gods of your world." Night Sky smiled faintly as she looked at the window.
That is a complex question. In a formal sense, I say no. We have no churches or great ceremonies in our name, no sacrifices or any such foolery.
She tilted her head.
but I cannot say that we've never had worshippers, or that there are some ponies who follow us out of anything other than absolute devotion. You would be surprised the lengths the ponies would go to accrue favor.
Elias held back a smile as Night Sky leaned against him, still looking up. On an unknown instinct, Elias wrapped his arm around her barrel, using his fingers to scratch lightly at the exposed chest fluff poking out of the neck of her dress. He noticed her lips spread slightly in a smile, and though she didn't nuzzle him, could very much tell that she wanted to. "I'd love to hear the history of it," he said, continuing to let his fingers drift across her fluff. "You know how I enjoy history." Nice Guy snorted.
I didn't know I had such a big history nerd as my best friend. Still, if it is tales of ancient ages, I suppose I can tell while we wait for the ceremony to begin.
She let out a long exhale.
Where to begin? I suppose when it started is too on the nose, so I shall start just before my banishment. T and I had risen to power over the 3 pony tribes for a little over 4 centuries by that point, and we were well received. We drove away the Wendigos, helped the tribes work together as a single society, and sent out a stern message about Equestrian's borders. Raids were becoming less frequent, and while my sister sought administrative improvement, I worked more with the realms of the arcane, using a team of my best mages to craft new runes to spread across the lands, hoping to better ponies' lives.
He sighed dreamily.
Those were the days. A cadre of ponies locked in tower for endless nights, writing and studying and talking, but most often not. We did a lot of thinking in those days, created many new spells, some sillier than others, but all of them useful in some form. We even inspired new kinds of magic, and expanded magical theories so that ponies like Starsail the Bearded could get his start. Did you know that we, the supposed rulers of Equestria, didn't know that there were more than 2 types of magic?
Elias gave her a deadpan look. "I have no frame of reference for any kind of magic. I'm a human, remember? I was under the impression it was all the same." Nice Guy scowled at him in return.
No need for snark, mister. Simply put, we have discovered that while there is one basic type of magic, of which all magic originates, there are many other forms. We have found and cataloged 5. Discord, dark magic, shadow magic, friendship, and ambient magics.
"What does this have to do with your history with religion?" Elias asked. "I apologize if it seems rude, but I don't think I'll be able to understand magic theory in a single go at a wedding." Nice Guy smiled at him.
I think you could if you put your mind to it, Elias. You are an intelligent individual.
She tilted her head.
Still, I shall not force the point. Essentially, it was a time of great advances in equestrian society, and the beginning of the divide between my sister and I. While she sought the love of the general populace through events and massive construction projects, I saw fit to benefit Equestrian by silently improving it. We created a rune that made rogue clouds easier to destroy, and another that created new waterways throughout our nation, making it easier for ponies to establish new towns and cities.
Nice Guy frowned.
Unfortunately, this meant that I was out of the public eye for great swaths of time, and while those working with me appreciated my efforts, a few others even know they were occurring. So-called explorers began discovering new rivers of my creation, then stole the credit for them and approached my sister for settling grants.
Elias switched to rubbing her chest fluff to rubbing her back. Her voice had gotten sharper and lower. It worried him that she would get angry during what was supposed to be a happy time. "Hey," he said at a whisper. "If you don't want to talk about this, don't. I was just curious is all." Nice Guy shook her head slowly and let out a deep exhale.
I am fine, Elias. It still agitates me to some extent.
She took another deep breath and sat up, then smiled at him.
I have long since matured past the petty jealousy that created Nightmare Moon, and talking through this is just proof of it.
With another breath, she pressed on.
Regardless, I was not the only pony who recognized that my credit was not being paid, and it is there that I began to gather a bit of a zealous following that formed the backbone of my Nightmare Army and still function as a hidden society to this day. Most were simply devoted to me, and supported me by attempting to shower me with gifts and praise.
She continued.
But others took their devotion to the next level. They stopped functioning at all during the daytime, and many political leaders began to denounce the HiE. They had a name for their group, but it escapes me at the moment. Something to do with night, I am sure.
She frowned lightly in thought.
I am fairly sure portions of the group are still functioning, hidden away of course, but I have not made contact with them in some time. Perhaps I should change that.
Elias looked forward. Aren't there any books on this supposed secret society? Why haven't I heard of this until now? Nice guy chuckled.
There is much that is unavailable to the public. We princesses have a restricted section for a reason, after all. But in truth, they did not exist as an organized part of equestrian society long enough to validate writing anything down. My transformation stole the stage, I'm afraid.
Her eyes became hazy with what Elias could only assume were dark thoughts. Then she shook her head and her eyes shifted back into focus, looking over the crowd of ponies as they filtered into the wedding hall. From what Elias could tell, they would be starting soon. Brides' mares were beginning to filter on the stage. Elias recognized none of them, and in truth, he doubted he ever would. Bookbinder would try to introduce him to her friends, and he would alienate himself from them. He had gotten lucky with Night Flash, and only his influence had drawn Bookbinder. He doubted he would make friends with ponies from outside the castle.
There is nothing that I am unaware of that contributes to my story.
Nice guy said.
But before Nightmare Moon, a cult began to form as a desperate effort to give me the acclaim I so desperately sought. They worshipped the very ground I walked, and since they worshipped me as a goddess, my sister had to be, by relation of blood, a goddess as well. Her own cult came about soon after, and though it never truly gained traction, Tia was very good at making sure to stay grounded at the time, and so her ponies never found cause to give her extra worship.
Night Sky tilted her head as the door beside the altar opened, and a group of stallions walked into the stage. Elias quickly spotted Shooting Star, followed quickly by a nervous-looking Night Flash. The stallion's eyes quickly flitted over the crowd. Elias raised his hand, giving the Pegasus a small wave. Night Flash's eyes lit up, and his nerves seemed to disappear. His tail began wagging back and forth at a desperate pace as he and his groomsmen ascended to their positions.
My religion,
Nice Guy said,
continued up until I transformed into Nightmare Moon. They took it as evidence of my divine right for the throne, and so threw their lots in with me, helping me build my forces. When I was banished, some were arrested, others fled. The cult itself was destroyed, and with that, organized religion, supporting my sister, and I was finished. All of this,
she said, motioning towards the wedding hall,
merely honors us as the noble officiants for all their weddings. The lower classes have elected their officiators in order to ensure that everyone that wants to be wed, but my sister and I still conduct the ceremonies for all nobles, and any friends we wish to.
She nodded towards Celestia as she entered the side door.
It was a stroke of luck that Bookbinder's family carries some minor noble blood. If they hadn't, I would have been officiating this evening.
Elias snorted as music from a piano started playing, and everyone rose. What a shame. It would have been an evening of me doing my job. Such a tragedy. Nice Guy slapped his legs.
Hush you. Even if you are suffering, which I don't believe you are, this is for the benefit of Night Flash and Bookbinder. You saw how that stallion's eyes lit up when he saw you, and I can only imagine that Bookbinder will be the same.
Elias reached behind his back and scratched her ears. Alright. No need to get after me. I was kidding. And besides, how could I suffer with such a cute date? He could practically feel the heat of her blush, but Elias dropped his arm and fell silent as the doors opened to reveal Bookbinder in a brilliant white dress. Her eyes shined, and as they momentarily locked with Elias, she had to take a moment to wipe away her tears before the wedding ceremony could truly begin, and her dad escorted down the aisle. Another super cute part of this chapter, as well as a very interesting history lesson, which is probably the last thing you expect to get during a wedding. However, man, I love it. 8 Day of Night's writing is so fucking good. I love it so much. What else I love are my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my tier 1s, Bounds, Kindness, Jason, Master Dreamless, Portal, Hyperlink, Jason, HK4, AK Texture, Lord High, Nightingale, Macario, Ponypod Entertainment, Starlight Blaze, Rain Flicker, and Tyler Perry. My tier 2s, Captain Blue Shadow, Chaotic Mist, The Animated Ghost, DJMax 2000, Elemental Wolf, Age 1 Wolf King, Potato 20, Mr. Crazy Deacon, Solar Comet, 212th Trooper, Mackenzie McCullough, Nocturne, Pablo Lennon, Redeemer of Dark, Souls Eclipse, Sword Brother and Mordred, Artie Bryant, Rihanna Dragonwolf, and Steel Spark. A large thank you to my previous Titan tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and User 1842. And a large thank you to my current ones, Bis Eclipse, and Silent Titan. I appreciate you guys' support so freaking much, and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.